Welcome to today's episode of Matters of Diversity with Dr. B. Today we're going to be talking with some of my Asian friends, our students here at UCF, and we're going to talk about a whole host of things as we get ready to bow out of this academic year at UCF. And so let me bring them in very quickly. First, we have Adrian Lee. She goes by the pronouns she and hers. She is a third year in her international global studies major with a minor in human communications. She is the president of the Asian Pacific American Coalition, APAC, here at UCF. And Adrian works with a variety of student leaders to advance the visibility of Asian American students on campus. In her free time, she enjoys photography and reading. We'll touch base on some of that. Ayan is an undergraduate student in his second year studying chemistry, biochemistry track at the University of Central Florida. He was born to two loving and caring immigrant parents from India. He aspires to become a medical doctor and researcher and hopes to give back to his community in any way, shape, or form. Currently, he is a member of the student government as a student body advocacy chair, as a member of UCF marching band, and various RSOs. Next, we have Azon Bonifacio. He is a first-generation college Filipino-American junior pursuing a communications degree in advertising public relations. He excels at all forms of integrated production and is striving towards a career in media relations strategies. Azon hopes to use his hard work and talents to inspire other first-generation students to look towards a brighter horizon. And last but not least, we have Dheeraj Lawani. He is a biomedical science major with a minor in religious and cultural studies. He is extremely passionate about his Indian heritage. He plans to attend medical school and to provide free medical care to impoverished communities in the future. So if you will, please join me and let's have a conversation. Adrian, Dheeraj, Ayan, Azon, how you all doing?
How's it going, Dr. B? Doing good. Thanks
Good,
for
good.
introducing us.
Doing well.
Excellent.
Yeah, doing great today.
Great. So what's been on your minds? Let's start there.
Alrighty. Hello. Hope everyone is doing well after their finals. I feel like it's been an incredibly tough semester. Not only have we all had to transition to virtual learning suddenly, but not being able to see friends and family for a period of time, and also just having to deal with all the social unrest as well as awakenings, I think, especially as people of color, as minorities. And I think that extended effort to not only just educate ourselves amidst a pandemic, but also having to confront a lot of, our own set of issues that came with this, the wave of xenophobia that arose with coronavirus and virus, kung flu virus, and not really having, I guess, or having to build the context to bridge conversations, right? When we talk about racism against Asians, I don't think that conversation is as prevalent or as understood, or I guess as respected. A lot of people, I think, see Asians along the lines of the model minority myth.
Right.
And a lot of Asians do play into that as well. So if any of my panelists here would like to join in on me kind of talking about this issue, there's just apparently so much erasure of Asian American history, how we have been targets of xenophobia and xenophobia, racism.
There's some issues
again, that has definitely been, sorry, if my Wi-Fi is glitching a bit, my internet connection is a little bit unstable, so
that's okay, but I think
if anyone would like to come save me.
I think what you're talking about is, though, a lot of what you're going through and what Asian Americans are experiencing is not validated, and it's as if it's not happening, and so you get glossed over, and I agree with that, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. Anybody else want to kind of pipe into this?
Yeah, I definitely agree. There's many, there are many people who are Asian who are doing extremely well, and whenever you look at that into the media, it's kind of great to see. But that's only a small population of Asians who are really getting the most benefits out of all of that. In reality, I'm from a city called Okeechobee, Florida, which is a very small town here, here, and it is a predominantly white, very Republican place with very strong conservative ideals. Um, and for me, whenever I was growing up here, it was very tough to try to fit in sometimes because you are not the same color as the person around you. People automatically think you're so smart, but in reality, I'm not. I really have to put in the effort to make the grades that I want or to do what I want to do, right? It really doesn't come easy to a lot of us, and many people around us think that, oh, it's so easy to them because they're Asian, but in reality, it's not like that. It's only that top 1% of people in America.
Period.
That are period, right? Period on that. Like it's truly just that top 1% who are truly getting the benefits. And for kids like me, especially in my community from where I'm from, it can be very tough and hard to get that validation of, we are people of color and we still need help. Like we see news stories around the nation saying, oh, they're going to, start including Asians, not within people of color, but for demographics, they've been saying that, oh, it might be time to put them, with the white population. And you've seen a few articles on that, and that's kind of like concerning because it might be a joke, it might not be, but for a lot of people, that will hurt people like me and people who are panelists on today's podcast because we have a certain identity and it just can't be ignored. We can't be shoved into another group just because you see so much. Yes, we see good publicity about Asian Americans, but that's not what most of the Asian American population is here in America.
Right. So, where do you think that myth comes from with regards to the model minority, as Adrian spoke to?
Yeah. I definitely think that comes to a lot of the immigration laws that were passed early on whenever the United States first started letting Asian Americans come here to the United States. You definitely see that a lot of the Asian Americans who do come are very much going to be well off to begin with, right? They're usually people who are I would say like more educated coming into America rather than other groups of immigrants, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what you typically see whenever it comes to those type of things. That's where I would say, the biggest myth starts off from. It's like we've hand selected a group of people to come to America to make their lives better, when in reality, they were already going to have a somewhat okay life or somewhat better life, where they started from.
Yeah. Dheeraj, you're shaking your head up and down. So tell me, what's your thoughts right now? What are you thinking?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with what Ayan is saying. I'm a big proponent of immigration, and what we see is that a lot of the Asian Americans that are brought to America in this process called the brain drain are brought because of their knowledge, their talents, they're essentially treated as a commodity or resource that are then expendable here in the United States or any other first world country. So, that clearly reflects after years of having that process and having immigration laws set for those specific purposes of having Asian Americans brought here for simply purposes of fulfilling tasks that no one else wants to do, or people that are too skilled or very skilled to perform those tasks. You set a lot of social stigmas and racial stigmas against those populations. And that's where I believe the idea that Asians are so smart actually comes from. from years of, using us as a resource for our knowledge.
So do you feel pressure? You said you're going to go into the medical profession. Do you feel pressure? And if so, what does that feel like?
I feel pressure every single day. Coming into college as an Asian American, you're expected to have a 4.0 GPA, have straight A's, get a perfect score on the MCAT to get into medical school. Because what we see in medical school right now is that there are so many Asians that there essentially is a quota at this point of how many Asians they let into the medical field. But, when we go into the actual field of doctors out there, all the physicians that I've shadowed or I've seen, there's a lack of actual cultural competency within those doctors. And so limiting future doctors from, actually growing, and future doctors from actually sharing the knowledge that we've accumulated, that's going to lead to a lack of diversity within the medical field, and essentially lead to a lot of problems such as misdiagnoses and even deaths that are that can be avoided by just having fair judgment of individuals, and essentially putting less stress on me at the end of the day, for not living up to certain standards just to get
something that you said that really gave me, it brought up something for me. You said cultural competency, and in terms of, I guess, someone's own self-awareness. Speak to that a little bit, and what that means to you.
For sure. So I practice that concept every day of my life. That is why I came into college knowing that I want to be a religious and cultural studies minor, because going into the medical field, you see a lot of patients that are misdiagnosed by predominantly white medical care workers, because, they don't have the background that these individuals have. They don't have the shared experiences. They don't have the knowledge of ethnic, regional, cultural, religious behaviors that these minority patients embody. And that's kind of what I want to focus on for my future, because I know I want to be that culturally competent physician and pass on my knowledge, and even reshape the medical education system at the end of the day. Because from a lot of discussions I've had with a lot of medical professionals, we see that medical education starts within medical school, and many future physicians are not being forced to, take ethics classes, take classes on cultural competency or within that varying region. So it's very important for me to hone on that now, so I can pass on that knowledge to future people, and also build a better connection with my patients.
Right. That's a beautiful thing. And I will tell you that I'm a counselor educator by trade, and I've been a part of a group. We created the multicultural social justice counseling competencies. And so one of these days we need to sit down and talk about that, because I think that even as counseling professionals use this, I think it's transferable to the skills of sets of all, because we have to be concerned about who we are as individuals, as well as, for your cases, your patients, right? And understanding your patient and where they come from. And not everybody fits into this, this neat little package of who you want them to be. You have to really meet them where they are in terms of their own worldviews and development. So that's pretty good. Thank you. I appreciate that. Azon, you are looking at going into media production. And so how do you see yourself incorporating the Asian experience in that regards?
Going back to the standard of this Asian American life kind of deal, it's a little funny because Ayan and Dheeraj, or I'm sorry, how do you pronounce it? Dheeraj. There you go. Yeah, you guys are going into the medical field, and my family is full of medical professionals. I have a uncle who's a physician, 2 siblings who are nurses, and cousins who are going into medical school right now. And kind of growing up, I kind of was pressured to go into that field as well. And I was kind of lost in trying to figure out what I wanted to do based on that, that pressure from my parents. But, over time, I kind of started doing my own things and started figuring out what I had interests in and how I wanted to help out the community in ways that I appreciated. And over time, I believe like my parents have come to the realization that, you know, like I can hold my own ground, and it's really not you know, up to their decision what I want to do with my career. So I think that kind of pressure, not just from society, but that cultural, you know, family deal kind of is woven into that social stigmas that Asian Americans have.
So you said something that was kind of curious to me. You said kind of following their narrative, right, and not doing what you decide to do in your own personal experiences. What was that like to kind of overstep that boundary? I would assume that's what it seems like to me, and really kind of chart your own pathway. What was that like for you?
I guess it's a bit difficult. I wouldn't consider myself like the black sheep of the family. I get along really well with my siblings and my parents and, you know, my entire like tree. But I think that a lot of the things that I took part in, such as like theater in high school and like studying what do you call it, communications in college, it's kind of like unorthodox, I guess, at least for my family. I don't know, it's a little not cliche or not typical for them, so it's a little hard to explain to them, trying to explain what I am pursuing or what I'm, you know, figuring out in myself and what I want to do. But it's not too much pressure to where it's like it's a good challenge, I'll say. It's kind of like it's a good challenge to like educate them that there's more than just, you know, what typical Filipino Americans become, or, you know, even Asian Americans become in, you know, in America. So
Right.
I'm glad that I get to kind of open their eyes.
Good, excellent.
No pun
Adrian, I see you
intended.
shaking your head there. What's going on for you?
Yeah, so I think my story is a little bit different than a lot of people's whose parents are immediate immigrants. My parents also immigrated from South Korea in the 1980s, but they attended high school and college here. And so when I encounter a lot of these conversations of like stereotypes of growing up, having to confront parents when it comes to different career choices or ideas for how they want to live their own life, I don't quite situate or identify with them as well. But I do reflect a lot on my privilege then, that I did have parents that were educated enough and they were able to find success in their professions that they felt comfortable for me to also pursue, or encourage me to pursue my passions. And so I study international global studies. I also have a minor in human communications. And when I talk to people about that, there's always that, I guess, drawback where it's like, oh, your parents, you know, they didn't want you to take another profession or anything. They didn't pressure you. And when I was growing up, there was always a little bit of joking, kind of like, oh, won't you go into pharmacy like your mom? But I didn't confront that. And when I continuously have to explain that kind of background, that my parents attended college here, I often find that there's still this conception that a lot of Asian American immigrants are new. And that's not always the case. Like our immigration background, as Ayan and Dheeraj so beautifully put it, is very diverse. And up until 1965, there was only the highly specialized immigrants that were allowed based off different quotas. But 1965 Immigration Act and like reform greatly expanded. Right. So there were a lot of Asian Americans that came to America. They were here when the American Gold Rush was also taking place. Like that's when our immigration first started. And yet so many still believe that our families are new. And, you know, when you look at the different demographics, like Japanese Americans, some of them have up to 7 generations, if not even more, in America. And as we talk about stereotypes, I think we should also confront the perpetual foreigner syndrome, where it's, oh, you're new. You're not really American yet. But that's not always the case. A lot of us have been here for a very long time. And, perhaps the accent may seem a little bit funny, but I can speak 2 languages. I don't know about you. I don't think everyone can do that.
Not well.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone, yeah.
Definitely not fluent. So you said that people have these expectations of you. Can you kind of talk about who those people were? Were they other Asian Americans, or were they people from other cultures that were kind of speaking out against that stereotype?
Yeah, so I think that you're talking about the stereotype I addressed of my parents,
Yeah.
kind of, yeah, giving me that pressure. So it often was my own friends, but it was also a lot of other people of color, because I used to live in California, so I was surrounded by Koreans. Then I came here to Florida, and my friend group became much more diverse, mostly because there was no Korean population here. But yeah, often
you had to go with what you knew.
yeah, no, I'm very thankful that I came here. I love living in Florida, and I love the culture here as well. But yeah, like my friends came from like different backgrounds. Some of them were Latino, some of them were Black, some of them were white. And yeah, it was all just kind of like very discreet, I think, ideas. And obviously I love my friends. But there were often times where I had to kind of correct and be like, oh, that's not necessarily true of the entire Asian American population. A lot of us have been here for generations. A lot of us may not even speak our own like home language. And that's a barrier that you have to face as an Asian American as well, is that people will often try to degrade how Asian you may be based off the certain qualities they believe that you should have,
Right.
Like, oh, you haven't been to your country. Oh, you don't know how to cook your food. Oh, you don't speak your language. That makes you less Asian, So if anyone would like to speak to that as well, please go ahead. I see everyone nodding here, so.
Yeah.
I mean, here's what I'll say. I definitely agree to that. Like for me, sometimes like I might mess up a few sentences or two whenever I speak in like our family's native tongue, right? And then like they like joke around about stuff like that. It's great and all, right? But like I definitely see like where you're coming from. And then also, kind of like to speak on the fact of like how people view like, generations of families being here. Like anytime that like I bring up anything culturally, sometimes, back at home in Okeechobee, right? Anytime that I sometimes, bring something culturally significant to me, they'll question it sometimes, right? Like they'll say like, why do you do that? Why are you vegetarian? Why do you eat these type of foods, right? And like, I get that sometimes, right?
Wait, can I ask
like,
you real quickly?
Yeah.
Who specifically are saying those types of things to you?
Yeah, so I would definitely say that's like, I would say like general population in like where I'm from.
So the people in your community.
Yeah, people in my
not
community.
necessarily your family. Okay, go ahead.
No, but yeah, like I'm definitely more Americanized than most of my family, right? I was the first person to be born in America for my family, but what is it? Like I try to like have a good blend of like both American and Indian parts, right? Because like I want to be able to fit in, because if I don't fit in, then I don't have people I can hang out with, right? But if I lose too much, then now I'm starting to distance myself from my family and what I knew. I feel like a lot of Asians who've been here for generations now, right? If their family's been here for generations, people still call them newbies only because, they follow a few of their, own cultural things. And that's not something that, that's not something that, people here in America should be, taunting them for. Because like, if the roles were reversed, right? If we were to, let's say, question them on, why you do something this way, right? How would that feel to them?
Right.
Like,
the funny part about that is, to become American means to kind of throw away what you think is from your heritage, right? From your cultural roots. But in most regards, America is a kind of a maybe, I don't know what you call it. It's like a pot or whatever of all these different things, right? Mm-hmm. So people who think that they don't have a culture, and so a lot of times I think in white communities, it's like, well, I don't have a culture. I can go over here. I love traveling and getting an artifact from here, or going to the Asian restaurant here and all these other things, because I don't have a culture. But that's a misnomer, right? In some regards, because you do have a culture, you just are so kind of accustomed to it that you don't realize that that's cultural as well, right? And so that's where the differences start to come into play, right? I'm different from you because I see things this way. Well, you see things from your cultural lens,
Yeah.
and you are acting upon it because of your cultural lens. And so that's, I think, one of the things that we don't discuss a lot, or I don't think the American culture discusses a lot. You know, we want to run to baseball as our pastime, and sports and football, and going fishing and golfing and all this other stuff. But that's cultural too. They just don't recognize that, right? It's just as cultural as you saying that you wanted to do anything that might be from your native land.
Yeah. No, exactly. Like you definitely start to think, without see, like, people like around me, like whenever they see some sort of like popular trend, right? Like, for example, on TikTok, they added this new delayed filter, right? And then, but like they started using like hand motions, and so like in the Hindu religion, right? We have a goddess, and like whenever they kind of like do the hand positions type of thing, like with the delayed filter, basically this goddess, she has like a bunch, like lots of arms, and like whenever you like look at idols of her, and like you see Americans do it, and it's kind of like it's kind of cool, but like now you're kind of like sort of infringing like onto like what
You're
we
not really
know.
paying homage.
Yeah.
You're not paying homage to the
Exactly.
culture.
Exactly. You're not paying homage to the culture. It's kind of like, I definitely feel like sometimes, like, for example, whenever we talk about food, right? Like, white, I hate to say it this way, but like certain Caucasians, they love like our cultural food, right? And that's great. We love that. But then sometimes they take it a step too far. So, like, for example, um, whenever you take, a certain part of a culture, like for example, like dream catchers, right? For Native Americans, right? That's something that's very spiritual for them. That's something that, that's born with, born within that Native culture. Um, and like Americans take it and then they like, oh, that's so cool, right? So instead of like respecting, like, let's say like the religion or the culture, they just look at it in the cool aspect without really understanding like where it's coming from, and they forget that that can sometimes hurt a culture, because now you're kind of like you're basically putting a cultural appropriation
Yeah.
onto
So
certain
I
things.
would like for you all to speak to that. Can you all kind of talk about that? Because you said a cultural appropriation, right? Cultural appropriation, and I think what you mean too is that you've taken it now out of context, and because of that, you are it's kind of insulting, right? Or it's a disrespect to the cultural background of someone who would really rather, if you're going to do it at least correctly, as opposed to taking it and co-opting it and doing something different. So thoughts, Azon, like you wanted to say something.
It's a little contradicting to that statement, I guess, because I don't quote me on this, but I believe that like Filipino culture is more in tune with Western cultures, just because it was mainly a Spain colony coming up.
Right.
So a lot of the what do you call it? Sorry, if you could just restate that question, it kind of just lost my train of thought.
So I'm wondering if when someone takes something from a culture,
Mm-hmm.
and then and I guess it's almost like a disrespect to the culture.
Oh, okay.
Right?
There you go. I remember now. It's kind of funny because like in Filipino culture, it's like I said, it's really tied to Western culture, and I don't want to say it's part of their culture to kind of take a piece of what America is going through, but
Right.
it kind of does reflect that, kind of with all these like musical like shows and these like game shows and stuff like that, all of these like whatever they're posting on social media and stuff like that. But but that's only for the Philippines. I can't really like say for how it is in different, you know, nations and whatnot, but for the Philippines it's very like almost copycat-y towards like whatever is going on in the US, just because it's more in tune with that, you know, Western civilization versus their, you know, Eastern
Is it
counterparts.
the connection that the Philippines has with the United States? Is that a part of it too, in terms of?
I believe so, yeah, just because it's such a strong tie to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I could speak to that point, I am not Filipino American, so I don't want to speak too much of this issue. But I think not many people also realize that Philippines was also an American colony for a while. And that's not something that we talk about, is that America also had colonies abroad. May not have been as violent as certain other European colonies, but our influence extended beyond just friendliness, but also in being involved in politics and kind of backing certain regimes. And so in Korea, with the US involvement in the Korean War, I think the way that we learn about that is often that, oh, America came, helped out, and then they left, and then they set up the DPRK and the Republic of Korea, and that was it. But we don't really talk about the American backing of the authoritarian regimes in South Korea. But that's another conversation. I kind of wanted to go back into cultural appropriation, but also the way that Asian trends or Asian culture becomes trendy. And I think this is kind of bleeding into the larger conversation of like, oh, some people may unknowingly really like a certain like icon, but without realizing what was its importance to a certain culture.
Yeah.
And even I think institutions of higher education often try to be more cognizant, just because, you know, there are so many students that come in, and student affairs is largely affected and built towards you know, the empowerment of these students of different socioeconomic backgrounds. But sometimes it slips, and even UCF downtown, I think that they had hosted a meeting, something about Asian names, calligraphy, without having the proper people there to guide or to talk about different calligraphy styles.
Right.
Yeah. So it's just kind of like these things may not seem very important at first, but they do have that, they are driven by cultural competency, as Dheeraj kind of put it. Like there needs to be a growing conscientious of the things that you partake of. Like dream catchers were very trendy when I was a teenager. I remember that. But I didn't learn about its significance until I came to college, and we started to learn more about natives and like their cultures and the ways that they were marginalized by US politics.
Right.
So our institutions of education sometimes fail in that mission to spread awareness of cultures and of histories, and of how like deeply important that really is to building equitable societies, you know. And I think ODI, in its mission to promote diversity and inclusion, there often comes up this conversation of what is equity, when there has been just so much marginalization of certain communities, like people of color, people based off the sex that they choose, the gender that they choose for themselves, and whatnot. And like those are all very nuanced conversations, but there needs to be people of those experiences that can speak out of those experiences as well at the institution to provide that oversight, you know?
Dheeraj, I see you chomping at the bit. What's going on?
Yeah, for sure. So I know you and Ayan were mentioning a lot of cultural appropriation, and there's a lot of things that go into decontextualization of different cultures or different religions for that matter. So I'll give you an example. For the Buddhist culture, or sorry, the Buddhist religion, there are two strong practices in the Buddhist religion, and they're called the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths. For the Eightfold Path, there are several different things you have to achieve in life to attain nirvana, which is the essential essence of life, what you're working towards at the end of the day. And that's a strongly Buddhist concept, such as mindfulness. And now we see that in westernized culture, mindfulness has completely taken a different turn into mindfulness in terms of how you feel physically, how you feel mentally, how you even eat. So there's mindfulness eating. So the individual John Kabat-Zinn, who actually started this mindfulness movement, really perpetuated the decontextualization of that idea of mindfulness from the Buddhist religion to insert it into daily life, where people can be mindful on a day-to-day basis instead of actually working towards something spiritually, or assessing it as like a lifelong process. So we do see a lot of decontextualization of religious practices, cultural practices. As Ayan was saying, a lot of pop culture movements, especially through Indian culture. In India, I grew up drinking haldi milk, which is now colloquially known in America as turmeric milk, or something, or turmeric lattes or whatnot. So even the smallest things have been decontextualized from their original practices into, these pop cultural trends and what really disturbs us is that we're not given the credit for those. We're not given the credit for those trends, because those are part of our culture. Those are part of my growing up, my understanding of my cultural background, my regional background, and it really it is just really disappointing to see that pop cultural trends just don't reflect the right ideals that we grew up with, or we attribute to those concepts.
Yeah. So how do we combat that? We know about it, we talk about it, we can kind of verbalize it in terms of how it makes us feel, but it doesn't translate to the larger community in terms of that. So it's a very difficult dialogue for many to have, because they don't recognize that they have co-opted a message, or they have co-opted a way of being, to kind of sit and meet them where they are, as opposed to, sometimes maybe even being just a little uncomfortable, understanding it from that perspective, right? It's like, when we started off this conversation, there's something to be said about respecting how someone pronounces their name, right? And while we brush it off sometimes and say, that's okay, but we should take the time out to make sure that we are acknowledging a person and validating who they are and what they stand for, as opposed to trying to make them kind of come to our comfort level, right? Come to our comfort zone and keep us in a space where we still maintain that control, right? I think it's what Adrian talked about earlier, about validating someone and their experiences, respecting someone and their experiences. And so I'm glad you all are bringing voice to that, because it's important. It's very important. So I want to maybe kind of change gears a little bit and talk about what you all do at UCF. You have your student organizations that you're involved with. What are some of the things that you're doing and that you're highlighting that I think really kind of embraces the Asian culture in some respects, but also maybe kind of embraces the UCF culture? And anyone can kind of go.
For sure, I can go ahead. So I am the president of the Indian Student Association at UCF. And, a lot of what we do is not only promote the Indian culture for the Indian members at UCF, but it's also to showcase, this different aspects of our culture to a wider range of people, including the UCF student body and even the UCF faculty and staff, because I think my culture is so special in terms of, the history, the trends that have arisen from our culture into pop culture. And we do a lot of reflection back on what can we see in modernity or post-modernity today that has arisen from, the Indian culture? So we do a lot of reflection. We do a lot of advocacy of our Indian community, because a lot of, the Indian community here as well, or the Indian American community here, as well as the general population of Orlando or just in America, they do not know a lot of political, social, racial, ethical justice movements that are happening in India. So our job is to communicate that.
Yes.
And appropriately tell them, this is what's happening. We have to acknowledge it, regardless of where we are, because we originated from that, and everything that happens over there influences everything that happens here.
I think that I like that, what you're talking about, because it's about, again, goes back to respect, right? And just recognizing that what you all do and what you represent has strong meaning. And so you can't just come and kind of, I guess, I don't know if it's whitewashing it or just, I don't know what you do to it, but you do something that kind of just takes away the actual culture from it. It just kind of, I'm just babbling right now, but it's like I know what I want to say, but I can't get the words out. And Azon, I think that you are ready to come in and save me, so come do that.
I honestly, I think you're kind of, I don't want to say it's the word, but I feel like de-ritualizing something. I feel like like de-ritualizing. I don't know if that's a real word, but that's how I would say it, because I feel like with a lot of these appropriations, with like you said, that turmeric milk, or how did you pronounce it? What was that? What kind of tea was it? Did you pronounce Dheeraj? It was like
Dheeraj, it was
Dheeraj.
Oh, haldi doodh.
Haldi, yeah. I feel like, how did you like take that beverage? Did you was it just like a morning thing, like your mother made, or was it like during a special holiday or whatnot? But I feel like that is not just that, for example, but there are things like that they just take and they kind of lose the authenticity of it. Yeah,
definitely. Thanks. Adrian, you look like you're going to say something.
Yeah, so you kind of talked about the UCF culture, I think, and creating welcoming spaces, creating inclusive spaces, and how we kind of operate within our student organizations. So, the Asian Pacific American Coalition, as I kind of explained before, is the umbrella council for 15 Asian interest organizations. The community has grown so exponentially, I feel like, compared to other universities that are much, I guess, like, UFU, FSU, they also have several student organizations dedicated to these missions. But UCF has a student body of 70,000 students. And again, that's just so many, all coming from different cultures. So it kind of speaks to the amount of diversity we have at our institution, correct? And so the way that APAC, I guess, is very present within the UCF community is by often acting as the student advocates for Asian American, visibility and awareness and our issues. And so while we do have showcases that demonstrate the different opportunities for engagement, we also really seek to build leaders. We seek to build students who are not only passionate for their cultural heritage, but also understand their placement as well as their potential, not just as minorities, but as active citizens of the United States. So this past election, we did a lot to kind of mobilize people in terms of voter outreach and voter information, and how they could engage with the civic process if they themselves were not even citizens. Nice. And so, APAC really prides itself in being that center for student and social political advocacy, but also being very present within the community, supporting one another, and just trying to be kind and compassionate. And as student leaders, there's so many things that can happen, and all while balancing a workload or a part-time job or family relations and social relationships. And so trying to be very present within the people who are doing a lot of the community building, right? To put on these cultural showcases and to demonstrate the necessity for having cultural programming. That's why I love being in this position that I am in. And that's why I love speaking to our student leaders, is because there's just so much weight at times. And I think the best thing that we can do as Knights is to extend that understanding that we all come from different backgrounds, and there are ways that we can support one another just by demonstrating kindness to one another. Yeah. So also having like workshops on mental health and specifically catered to our presidents, as well as having spaces to just kind of have peer-to-peer support. I think that's really important amongst communities of color, because our weight is different than other, white students. Yeah. There are pressures at home, there's pressures abroad, there's like movements that we care about in our home countries, as well as what's happening in America. Right. So we're at the intersections of just so much, I think, already, and trying to communicate that with our administration and communicate how much more that we need to do to expand on the cultural funding that we have for our organizations as well. Yeah. So yeah.
So it's really interesting. You talk about that. It's like the connection that we have with our homeland is one that will provide or add stress or concern or joy or whatever to the mix, because we have connection, right? We're not so distant from it. And I think a lot of times that's what happens. We see things over in other areas and we just don't think about it because it's like, well, it's over there. And so I'm not too concerned. But when we think about, you have family and friends and culture and generations of things that are in your homeland that you pay homage to and that you still love and respect. So that's kind of what's maybe not a part of that narrative. What about you, Ayan, your organization? What's going on with yours?
Yeah, so being a part of student government, really amazing, because we get to connect with RSO leaders like Adrian and Dheeraj. So in reality, like with my position in student government as a student body advocacy chair, we're really in this like overbranching area where we write resolutions, where we show support of something. We talk to leaders like you, Dr. Butler, and Dr. Cartwright, and we really try to make sure that with anything that the student body is concerned with, right, that we make sure that we go out and we talk to you all. This way that we have things in set, we have plans which are ready to combat anything that would hurt the diversity and the inclusion of people here at UCF. So for example, you might remember whenever Senator Noreen Kaleha and I, and I'm pretty sure Adrian was also there, whenever we came up and talked to you about xenophobia and a lot of the rhetorics that students were facing during this time over the summer. We've had.
What will UCF do?
Huh?
And what will UCF be doing to make sure that they support Asian students?
Yeah, so with talks with you, Dr. Cartwright, and so many other community leaders, we're thankful that you guys are going to, make sure that statements are put out. We're thankful that you guys are going to be, promoting, we're not, promoting, I'm so sorry, I really can't speak, that you guys are going to be promoting, more Asian cultures. You guys are going to be making sure that with everything that you guys do, that students are aware that we can't be hurting a certain group of people because of
right.
what you might think, right? And we're very, very grateful for everything that you guys are doing.
It's about being inclusive. It's about making sure that people are at the table.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
One thing that comes up with that is that we're starting through ODI, we're starting the Odyssey Ambassadors. And so we got a call out right now for students across the campus to kind of be an advisory council for the ODI office and just university as a whole, we want these individuals to learn to be facilitators of difficult dialogues around a host of different things, and to be ambassadors and mentors and things along those lines for the ODI programming. And so, we're always going to be on the lookout. But what you're talking about is having people at the table, having voices from all concerns, because I don't know exactly what's going on for you. I didn't grow up in India. And so I didn't grow up in India and then come to the United States. And so it would be inappropriate for me to try to make a way for you without having you there to tell me what it is that you need, right? And so that's kind of where we're going. So we're coming up on the end of our time, and I'm just wondering, any other things that are coming up for you all that you want to talk about and share?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to share some updates as to what our community is doing. So APAM preparations have begun, and I cannot speak to how excited I am for our upcoming celebration. APAM usually falls actually on the national calendar in May, but unfortunately, as our kind of like academic schedule ends before then, we normally celebrate it between March to April. And so the committee is made up of the different representatives from our 15 student organizations. And so I just think that there's going to be a lot of fun things that happen. Our Jade Stole ceremony, where we celebrate our graduating seniors, as well as like the achievements of our student organizations from their term, is always something to look forward to. And we would love to have faculty, staff present. We would love to have people from ODI also present, to kind of like celebrate with us. But yeah, just really looking forward to that. And I hope that there will be people from our community that also end up joining the Odyssey ambassadors, right?
Odyssey ambassadors, yes.
Odyssey ambassadors. Yeah, perhaps we could even expand that one day to specifically include positions for people from the Black community or the Latinx community or the Asian American community, just so that there is always a voice present. And I think in a lot of conversations that we've had with administration, we know that there is the intention to build multicultural awareness and to support one another as minorities. But it's also incredibly important that we don't erase our different groups and erase our different experiences by just lumping it all collectively as just people of color. And the past summer, we've seen a really big movement to expand beyond using just people of color, but to specifically use the term BIPOC, which is Black Indigenous people of color, as these experiences are not the same, and that they need to be understood, and that they must be understood in order to build the equitable communities that we want to see. Yes. So perhaps that is a consideration for further development. I'm not sure, as the program has just started, as you mentioned.
Right.
But yeah, I'm really glad that student government also now has an API caucus where senators who identify as such, or even just as people of color, can come sit in and listen. Yes. I'm really hoping that these can be places of education where before incidences happen, we can kind of be a little bit ahead of that. There is an arc of events, right? There's always
being open and understanding of how to embrace it once it comes up, right? And so
exactly.
To not always be reactive, but to be, I know you're talking about being proactive, but at the same time, recognizing that we don't know what's going to come in the door at any given point in time. But we should be knowledgeable and culturally aware and responsive, and humility needs to be there to be able to deal with it once it comes. So thank you, Adrian, for sharing that. Thank you, Dheeraj and Azon. Ayan, just really quickly, is there anything that you want to bring up before we close out today?
Yeah, before we close up, within student government, we recently heard about Professor Quakenbash, and we are within the entire committee, we are deeply saddened to hear that, whenever we hear a professor, getting outs like that, because for a lot of students, we come here to UCF because of its diversity, because there's such a great population here, and such a great culture. And whenever we see a professor, talking about, the coronavirus as Kung Flu or any sort of,
derogatory things.
Exactly, any sort of derogatory thing, it really hurts, to hear that. Within student government, we will definitely be making a few statements based off of that. We're definitely going to be hopefully talking to you and other campus leaders. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I definitely feel very sorry for everyone who had to deal with this, because it's not something that we should be dealing with, especially in this age and time. But for other happier things, within student government, we're hopefully going to be passing proclamations for major cultural holidays, especially within our Asian community and other communities throughout. And we're hopefully going to be writing more resolutions in support of many things. And hopefully we'll be able to pass more fiscal events for our community. And we'll see where all that takes us.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I appreciate everything that you all are doing, and I stand behind you, and I will support you in any ways that I can. And when it comes to professors maybe not living up to their civic duties and treating everyone as human beings and treating people with respect, I know that the university is looking into how to deal with these matters, and are not just sitting by idly and allowing students to be kind of disparaged or hurt. And so now that it's in our view, we take action. And that's one of the things that I think that the university is really trying to do, is to make sure that we find ways that students can come and share and tell us what's happening, so that we can nip it in the bud or deal with it, whatever ways that it has to. But it will be, not sure what the outcomes of all this will be, but positiveness is where the university is heading. And so it's there to embrace you all and recognize that you are the reason why we're here. And so we're going to take that into the strongest consideration in making sure that anyone who's a violation of that or in violation of that is dealt with. And so I appreciate you bringing that up and being a part of this. So thank you all today. It's been fun talking with you all. I'm gonna have you all back. As you can see, we have more to talk about than what an hour is able to give us. And so thank you so much for taking the time out, especially this close to the end of the year. I know that you have other things that you can be doing, but you chose to sit here with me for an hour, and I appreciate it. Just so you all know, we have a podcast coming up with the chief of police and the deputy chief here on 23rd. And we'll have a great conversation about what the police department is doing on our UCF campus in support of our students and our people who are working here as well. And so with that, I'm going to close out and say to you all happy holidays and thank you. I'm hoping that your grades were all phenomenal and that it's where you needed to be. And that's no pressure, no pressure. What I'm saying to you is I'm hoping that you got what you wanted out of your education this semester. So have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you soon, okay?
Thank you. Bye.